Are you saying that Timothy Geithner, the Secretary of the Treasury, and others in the administration with the banks are engaged in a cover-up to keep us from knowing what went wrong? And
Absolutely.
You are?
Absolutely. Because they are scared to death. All right? They're scared to death of a collapse. They're afraid that if they admit the truth that many of the large banks are insolvent, they think Americans are a bunch of cowards and they will run and screaming to the exits, and we won't rely on deposit insurance. And by the way, you can rely on deposit insurance. And it's foolishness. All right? Now, it may be worse than that. You can impute more cynical motives, but I think they are sincerely just panicked about we just can't let big banks fail. That's wrong.
But what might happen at this point if, in fact, they keep from us the true health of the banks?
Well, then the banks will, as they did in Japan, either stay enormously weak or the Treasury will be forced to increasingly absurd giveaways of taxpayer money. We've seen how horrific AIG. Right? And remember, they kept secret from everyone what they were doing with, Treasury. And both administrations, the Bush administration and now the Obama administration, kept secret from us what was being done with AIG. AIG was being used secretly to bail out favored banks, like UBS and like Goldman Sachs, Secretary Paulson's firm that he had come from being CEO. It got the largest amount of money, $12.9 billion, and they didn't want us to know that. And it was only congressional pressure, and not congressional pressure, by the way, on Geithner, but congressional pressure on AIG, where Congress said, we will not give you a single penny more unless we know who received the money. And, when he was Treasury Secretary, Paulson created a recommendation group to tell Treasury what they ought to do with AIG, and he put Goldman Sachs on it.
Even though Goldman Sachs had a big vested stake.
Massive stake, and even though he had just been CEO of Goldman Sachs before becoming Treasury Secretary. Now, in most stages in American history, that would be a scandal of such proportions that he wouldn't be allowed in civilized society.
Yeah, like a conflict of interest, it seems.
Massive conflict.
So how did they get away with it?
I don't know whether we've lost our capability of outrage or whether the cover-up has been so successful that people just don't have the facts to react to it.
Who's going to get the facts?
We need some chairmen or chairwomen in Congress to hold the necessary hearings, and we can blast this out. But if you leave the failed CEOs in place, it isn't just that they're terrible business people, though they are, and it isn't just that they lack integrity, though they do, because they were engaged in these frauds, but they're not going to disclose the truth about the assets.
And we have to know that in order to know what?
To know everything, to know who committed the frauds, whose bonuses we should recover, how much the assets are worth, how much they should be sold for, is the bank insolvent such that we should resolve it in this way. It's the predicate, right? You need to know the facts to make intelligent decisions, and they're deliberately leaving in place the people that cause the problem because they don't want the facts. And this is not new. The Reagan administration's central priority at all times during the savings and loan crisis was covering up the losses.
So you're saying that people in power, political power and financial power, act in concert when their own behinds are in the ringer, right?
That's right, and it's particularly a crisis that brings this out, because then the class of the banker says, you've got to keep the information away from the public or everything will collapse. Right? If they understand how bad it is, they'll run for the exits.
Yeah.